Bruce, is that your name?
Mm-hmm.
What he said about doing the devotionals or the testimonials is one of the things we've done. We call it ministry minutes, and we try and tell people, really, we mean just a minute. What we do, we tack this on to some of our liturgies after the post-communion prayer, okay? So before everybody leaves, we say just a minute, and somebody stands up and gives a testimony about one or two ministries in the church that have changed them, either through ministering to them or more often through their participation in that ministry. And you know, it's run the gamut of people with different experiences. It gives people an idea of what they can do and what they can be involved in. Some of these ministries, as you know, go on behind the scenes. Nobody even knows that they're going on. But so it gives people an opportunity to see, here's something I can be involved in.
And we do these year-round.
Yeah.
I'm confused. These are to show what you've been doing or what you've accomplished? Or
No, they're like in Baptist church we would call it a testimony, where you just stand up and say, you know, I've been part of the outreach ministry. You know, we gather, you know, a couple times a month to give, you know, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches to homeless kids, and it's touched me this way.
Okay, so just a statement of somebody's personal involvement.
Right.
In
Correct.
Yeah, the focus really being how ministry, whatever ministry it is, has helped form and shape their life.
Mm-hmm.
It's that idea of by giving, this is what I've gotten. Reinforcing that in a way that has nothing to do with dollars.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I loved about our ministry minutes is that when we asked people to do them, they weren't about, we didn't ask you to talk about stewardship. We did, in fact, we actually liked it when they didn't talk about stewardship. And they were exceptionally powerful, some of them were exceptionally powerful, and it was a way to broaden our minds to see how does stewardship enable us to complete these ministries that we're doing, which was, I think, a powerful link for a lot of people was the realization that stewardship as a ministry brings us able to do the ministries that we love.
It took the focus off of all they talk about is money and brought it into Thanksgiving. And that was a huge thing for us.
Points to ponder is another thing we've done, and I know that's a cliched phrase, but we call them points to ponder in grace, gratitude, and generosity. When it gets to be around, we were going to do these year-round too, and we had a hard time coming up with that many points. So when it gets to be around stewardship time, we're trying to orient people once again to thinking about their commitment to the church. So for about 3 months there, September to end of November, December, we publish these in the bulletin. Now whether anybody reads them, I don't know, but I haven't heard any negative feedback. And they're just little things like, you know, this week think about what's the best gift you ever received and what made that an excellent gift. Or what's the best gift or the happiest you've ever made somebody by giving. You know, just little things like that. And I don't, you're all trying to write this down furiously. You can copy my notes after if you'd like. Regular church newsletter articles, which I assume that's also what the epistle is, Bruce?
Pardon?
The epistle, you talked about the epistle?
It's a news, what's happening in the near future, going on and things like that. Yeah.
So we try to do, I think our newsletter comes out once every 2 months.
Is yours electronic or do you mail
It is now.
It just started being, our first electronic will, and we've got some folks who, you know, still will prefer the mail, but
Okay.
what we try to do in these is all, you know, say this is what stewardship's doing, you know, right now in the church, and if you're interested in getting involved, etc. But also do sort of a devotional type thing and talk about the rich young ruler, or talk about the, you know, the parable of the talents, or something like that, to kind of give people a year-round. So it's not just one sermon that they get in September, but it's or October, I guess it is.
Depends on the year.
Depends on the year. Stewardship frequently asked questions, which I think you guys actually have a copy of these in the at the end of your materials. And the reason we did this is we kept getting people who would come and ask sort of the same questions over and over again. So we thought, well, if this many people have these questions, why not take some of the ones that we've gotten about our stewardship program and answer them in sort of concise ways. And so this is something that we always have available at the back of our church for newcomers or for people who've just forgotten. And we keep it on our church website also. It talks some about the theology and the practice of stewardship. And I think that theology of stewardship is important. Why do we do some of the things we do? Well, if we don't know, then maybe we should think about why we're you know, think about doing something different.
A great example of that is that we have an annual fundraiser, we call our gala. A lot of people thought, well, I spent $50 on my gala ticket and you spent $75 on silent auction prizes. So, you know, that's $125, which is what I pledge every month. So I just didn't turn in my pledge that month. There's a difference between a pledge and a gift. Well, I gave $25 for Christmas flowers, so I took that off my pledge. And so part of what we wanted to do is separate out some of those, and it was no malicious intent that they were not meeting their pledge. It was a not full understanding of what a pledge really was.
One thing we've done that's sort of a combination of the newsletter and the ministry minutes is called a meditation booklet. And we had a really good response to this last year. What we did is we invited several people in the parish, and we went to specific people, and asked them to respond to the question, how has intentional giving of time, talent, and treasure, changed you, basically, you know? And some of it, you had people from, again, all economic spectrums, all different levels of, you know, along their spiritual journey. And the result of this, we put in a meditation booklet. We just printed it off on our copy machine, stapled it together, and handed it out for people to read one reflection a day during the month of October for stewardship. And I mean, we have some examples of that. That's actually what your packets begin with.
First three things are.
We picked three, I don't want to say best, but three that were really excellent. You know, that the meditation booklets have a threefold benefit, I think. Or programs like this. It doesn't have to be a book. But when you broaden that appeal, you get more people who feel like what you said, that they're part of the process rather than just somebody just preaching at them, that they are part of stewardship. Reading those meditations edified people who even were not part of it, and people found that their own faith and their own giving discipline was strengthened in just writing and reflecting on why is it that I really do this? How does this change me? So we had a pretty good result with that. I've just been yammering on here now for, I mean, I don't want to stop completely for questions, but has anything I've said so far been unclear, or? I'll keep going then. Like I said, I grew up a Baptist. I could go on for hours. Stewardship letters were something that we revamped. And I don't, again, remember too many stewardship letters because I'm still fairly new to the parish. But we were very intentional about focusing these letters not on, gosh, we got to pay the bills, or gosh, salaries are, you know, just eating us alive. It was, here's what we've been doing. You know, we've broadened our outreach ministry, we've broadened our choir, or whatever. And then moving that to, this is what you gave last year. Would you be able to give this much this year? And so that was a move from what we've done in the past to basically just sending out a letter for pledgers and a letter for non-pledgers.
You actually say, here's the amount of money you gave last year.
Right.
Can you help with that a little more?
Right. And I'll admit that when we started doing this at the suggestion of our canon for development in the Diocese of Chicago, and when he came and said this, I thought, Mike, this will never work. For two reasons. One, it's going to make everybody angry, and it's going to terrify our stewardship committee.
And rector.
And rector to sit down and do this. And do you know that I can only think of three people out of 75 pledgers, basically, who even had a question about it. Now, some people, and some of this is in the charts, so you can look at that maybe later, but not everybody gave what we expected. Some people exceeded what we expected. And I had a couple people come up and say, you know, I never thought about it, but yeah, I could give that much, you know. So we were pleasantly surprised.
In this, can you give more? Did you ask for dollar amount or percentage amount?
We asked for dollar amount.
The letter's on the back.
Right.
Oh,
I
okay.
mean, that's really
sample?
good to read, the way it's worded.
Okay.
It's very, you know.
I'd forgotten that it was in the packet, so
Yeah.
yes, that is helpful.
It's real helpful the way it's worded. It's not like, you know, this is what you should do. It's just say we come here, we pray that you will consider increasing your pledges. I think that's.
I think in that letter too, I confess I didn't read it last night, but in there is some of the wording about this is not just about the need of the church, but about the
Right.
opportunity to give.
Yeah,
What
so
it
this
means-
amount is not a demand or an expectation. It's written mean, rather it's a recognition that we have an opportunity to grow in faith.
Now, can we use that here? No, I'm sorry.
If you can, we copied a lot of this from our canon for development and then added our own
Yeah.
stuff, so.
Yeah, we would encourage you to
Modify.
make it your own.
Sure.
Right.
We're big believers that one size doesn't fit all in the, but we've begged and borrowed from all over the place, so, you know.
So I see you have like it's a mail merge or
Mhm.
whatever. How did you decide how much you thought they should?
We did that together. So there were cases where pastorally we knew, you know, some was out of work and let's not ask for an increase, you know, or minimal. It was frankly done over coffee, you know.
Okay,
just
so
sort
there
of-
was no like.
No
or
scientific
set-
method.
No
to it.
scientific set percentage or anything.
No, I mean, that's one of the places where it's helpful to have someone who has ongoing pastoral responsibilities for the parish, who has a sense, for the most part, of where many people are. And, you know, I mean, there are places that are big enough that the rector doesn't know everybody, but we're the size that I know most of the folks. And, you know, to be able to sit down and go, oh, no, really don't send that letter to them because that's going to be really hard because of X, Y, and Z, and what can we do instead, that kind of thing. But, yeah.
The flip side of that is, don't, to use a Bushism, don't misunderestimate people. And don't rob them of an opportunity for a blessing. You may think, oh, I don't want to ask them because they'll be sensitive about this or because I don't think they can afford it. And they may be tickled to death that you have asked them to do this and to be able to give. And some of the people who bless me the most are looking at ones who, I mean, they're not giving and going into the poorhouse, but they're giving, and you look at their financial situation, you say, how in the world can they afford it? But it's important to them. And that blesses my heart to think about those people. You know?
I think back often to that story I told you about at the beginning of this family who had very meager income and rejoiced in giving the first 10% back to God via the church. And that was just part of who they were. And it's funny, it took me 15 years to learn from them, but I did. So, I mean, yeah, I think Levi's right.
One thing that is, you say this is terrifying, but then you think, I get letters from the Democratic Party saying, will you give this much a month? I get letters from, the Sierra Club or whatever, and they put a dollar amount in there. So I would much rather see the church thrive even than some of these other places. I'm not going to cast aspersions on the Sierra Club, but what is really important to me is the church. So I feel like the church has even more authority to ask for some of these things. If we really believe what we say, that we're not just coming here and singing of it, but we're saving souls and we're changing lives. What could be more important or worth increases in giving than that? The next thing that we did was have a festive meal, and I like a meal. And I like festivity, so this is like a twofer. But what we did is on the eve of our stewardship pledging gathering, we had a meal. It was a free meal. No tickets, RSVP so we can know how many people are coming. We had our guild space is not nearly as big or as ample as this. It was just a small, intimate little room. But we had candles. We had just spaghetti. We had 2 different sauces.
It was delicious, though. They made it.
We did. It was homemade stuff. We didn't cater it. We might cater it if we had more money, but
A little bit of wine.
a little bit of wine.
Ask if you serve wine.
And actually, the model for this meal, we got this from the Episcopal Network for Stewardship. Some people use this as this is where they make their sell for their pledges. You sit down, you get, I don't want to say liquored up, but you get, you're in the moment, you're in the evening, and they pop down a pledge card.
Laid back.
Right.
Sign
We
here.
didn't want to do that. We intentionally decided not to talk about money because we figured people are smart. People can get this on their own. This was just a celebration of our life and our community together.
We wanted this to be, we wanted this to model what we were hoping our church models for each other and for the community. We wanted it to model abundance.
So you did this before.
Stewardship Sunday the night before.
The night before the
Saturday night.
stewardship.
Yeah, but to be clear, we don't just have Stewardship Sunday. We have a month of
Right.
focus time,
Month.
and then we year-round have, stewardship is in the vernacular year-round, so.
Right.
So you
What's it
ask,
on?
you ask, you constantly ask.
No, stewardship's not all about asking. It's about inviting people into, because stewardship is not just about money. So, you know what I mean? Like,
Sure I know.
yeah, so this was the night before the in-gathering though,
Mhm.
so.
And we had, actually one of my professors from college is a big Episcopalian. I didn't know it because I didn't care about church when I was in college, but we've stayed in touch. And he came and just talked with us about something that you would think has nothing to do with stewardship. He talked to us about his wife living with and eventually dying with cancer, and how he found grace in the people that prayed for him, in the way that his church ministered to him through this, in the caregivers that she had. And it was a very, very moving experience. So I like it. I think we'll do it again. And it just gets people focused about what's really important.
One of the things that TENS recommends on this meal too is that it's not a clergy person that does it, it's a lay person. And ideally one who's a generous giver and outside your parish, who can talk about really well how giving has made a difference in their life. And he did that just beautifully, again, with a topic you would have never expected. Wasn't a dry eye in the house,
Our in-gathering liturgy, which this happens on one specific Sunday. And the past few years, it's been the last Sunday. It's not been the last Sunday in October because Halloween is the last, so we don't want any ghouls or goblins to reign on our stewardship parade. So, it's been the second to last Sunday in October. But what we do is we have lay preaching. Sometimes it's the stewardship chairman. In the past, it has been just different people who are pledging, who giving has made a difference in their life. We have special prayers of the people that we write for the day. You've got the rubrics that you've got to make sure you cover everybody, pray for the bishops, and all this. But you can do that in a way that orients people specifically to stewardship. And some of the prayers that are actually in the prayer book are...
Yeah, but we use those stewardship prayers all month too.
Oh yeah, that's true. And we have a special stewardship collect that we use, or that Sarah uses. And then we have a space in the liturgy for people actually to bring their pledge forward. It's like the closest thing we get to a Billy Graham crusade, where people stand up, we have some music, and people walk forward and they place that offering of the pledge in a basket there on the altar, and Sarah takes them and blesses them during the Eucharist.
Yeah, they stay up on the table with us. I will say the clergy all bring their pledges up too, because I don't know about y'all's churches. One of the things, I do mine electronically, but even if I did it by check, they don't ever bring the plate by me, so nobody ever sees the priest give. And so the clergy and the choir all come up, and those are people who frequently aren't seen throwing theirs in.
And I will say, I don't want to say we seed the pot or whatever, but we do talk to the vestry beforehand, like, it's going to be important that you guys are in that line, There again, the velvet glove and the iron fist. Not really. Not really. Then we do weekly updates, which I think is what
Thank you.
Dean, what's your last name? Can I just call you Bob?
Yes.
Dean Bob.
I'm looking at our service bulletin for tomorrow. What we do is we publish, last Sunday was May 8th, pledge giving, 4943. Other offerings, 10,070. Designated giving, 4,230. Total Sunday attendance. Then at the bottom, right under that, we say pledged income required weekly to fund St. Paul's budget, $7,400. Total income required weekly to fund this parish, $11,485. I mean, the figures are all right out there.
Mm-hmm.
Because our treasurer, Bruce Landwehr, believes there should be no secrets.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
That's true.
Lay it all out there.
Transparency is really important.
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Well, that was another thing that, not to cast any aspersions on anybody else, but when it's just one person, when it's one stewardship chairman doing the thank yous, those can kind of fall behind. Well, if somebody makes a pledge and they don't get a thank you till 4 months later, they don't feel really thanked and appreciated. So we've tried to make a point. Last year, the whole committee split people up and sort of, you take this many, and hand wrote the thank yous. This year, I sat down and did them individually myself as they came in, because they trickle in. If you've ever run, you get a big bunch of them front loaded, and then you get 3 or 4 every Sunday. But we got them in the mail Monday or Tuesday after they came in, so that people knew right away, we got your pledge, we acknowledge it,
We also acknowledge, and here's a little controversial point we did, we acknowledge the amount they pledged.
Mhm.
Which is important because some people's handwriting is terrible. So like we had one person who it looked like their pledge had gone up like 2,000%. Well, it's because the decimal point wasn't in the right place, you know. So when we wrote, "Thank you for your pledge of $200,000," they wrote back and were like, "Sorry, but that's not what you know." So it's a fact checker as well.
We've also had the opposite happen where somebody writes something and you think, oh, this is the pledge for the year, and then you think, no, I mean that's for the week. So praise the Lord, that it's good to have clarity on those things. The weekly updates, going back to that, we make sure to do them in context. Not just say, well, we've got $100,000 pledged. Well, people hear $100,000, wow, that's great. If you don't know that it takes $250,000 to keep the church running, you can't put that in. We got to keep going. And having a goal is something that we did this year too, rather than just pledge whatever and let's just see how we turn out. We set a goal of $200,000. We didn't reach $200,000, but I think we came closer than we would have if we hadn't set that out there for people to aspire to. A couple more things. We had a visual aid, and this was less controversial than what I thought it might be too. But what we did this year, and I don't know that we'll do it this way next year, but we had a tree. Okay, we made a paper mache tree, and as people turned in their pledges, we put their name and put a leaf on the thing. We didn't put how much they pledged. We didn't put, people who pledged this down here and this, you get at the top of the tree. But if you turn in a pledge card, even with no amount on it, you got a leaf on the tree. So this had the advantage of making people feel publicly recognized without, saying how much or how little they gave. But it also had sort of the backhanded reminder to people who, if they forgot, I haven't turned in my pledge card, they get in the guild room, they see this tree, I got to do that next week, And it's just a subtle way to do that. One thing that I think is really important about this kind of public recognition is if we have somebody who's in choir, or we have somebody who is in acolytes, or we have somebody who brings a casserole, we all thank them and we clap for them publicly. But you've got people who give year after year after year. Some people sacrificially, giving more than you think they possibly could. And it's a thankless thing to sit there in those pews and do that because you never get acknowledged. So this is a way, not just to send that thank you, but to say, we recognize that and we value that in the same way that we would if somebody who gives a gift of time or talent. The last thing that we did was in November, coming straight off of our stewardship month, we had a planned giving workshop. And this is, you're going to talk about death and taxes. So you got to figure out a way to get people there to talk about these things. And I thought we did great. We had 30 or 40 people who came. It was a 2-week session. The first week it was talking about things like healthcare powers of attorney, wills, trusts, how can you leave the church in your will. The second week was talking about funeral planning. What songs do you want? What songs do you absolutely loathe? If anybody sings "'Tis a Gift to Be Simple" at my funeral, I'll come back and haunt them. But they know that. So we gave people an opportunity to plan their funerals.
And we had a lot of fun doing it too.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a fun.
One of the things we did with the Plan and Giving workshop was we did hypotheticals. We used people in the congregation. Suppose this one marries this one, and then he dies, and she runs off with a yodeler. Who's going to get the money? Things like that to keep it interesting and fun. And we've actually got, I don't know if it's our website.
It's not in here. We want to make sure, we'll write our website up here. That resource is online, as is some of the things you have are online as well. The meditation booklet in full is online, as is the PowerPoint and the manual that goes with the life-giving, the life planning.
And what I did, I stole the PowerPoint idea from the Diocese of Olympia. I don't know if any of you have ever used any of their resources. They are great for stewardship.
They're phenomenal.
So
Greg Rickles is the stewardship maker.
Olympia in Washington. So I took it and modified it with, I'm a lawyer, so I recognize that Washington law on wills and trusts and some of that stuff was different than what it would be in Illinois. But the one that we had, take it, modify it, and use it.
And please recognize that there's no legal advice implied in the PowerPoint.
That's true. Don't sue me if don't sue me. That's just a good rule, blanket rule.
What's the website for that?
Yeah.
I'll write it up here. I'll write it up again later, but it's www.stpeters, STPETRS, Chicago.
It's on your letter.
Is it?
Yeah, it's
Oh,
on the
no.
back of the letter there.
I meant the one for Olympia.
Oh, okay.
No, no.
Well,
Oh, that's
Google.
not, I'm
You
sorry.
might have to Google
I
that.
have to Google it?
If you go under, but yeah, you can Google Diocese of Olympia and Stewardship and you'll get tons of stuff. Our website, if you go under our ministries, you'll find our Stewardship ministry team, and that has a lot of hyperlinks to resources.
So, you know, like I said, I've been yammering for a long time. All of these things we talked about, it just sounds like an explosion of stuff. When you've got 9 people doing it, when you're broadening it out, asking people, can you help do this? I mean, for this ministry, or this meal, we had people who said, oh, I'd be happy to do the lighting and sound for that. We got a great guy who is involved in the theater, and I'll do the lighting and sound for that, you know. Or people who said that I'll bring a dessert to this or whatever. The only areas of challenge, the only pushback that we got from any of this came from a couple people who were upset about the specificity in the letters. And what was the other thing? Oh, basically that some people didn't like that the rector knew what they were giving, or that the stewardship committee knew. And, you know, that was a choice that we made, that basically we can't do our jobs if we don't have kind of an idea of what we've come from and where we're going. And I would say, though, that most of it has not been, oh, I can't believe you did that. It's been, why are we doing this differently? And when you explain it, oh, that makes sense, you know? So one thing I'll say, don't be afraid to fail, but also don't think, well, that'll never work. Because if you had asked me 2 years ago, would this stuff work in our place, I would have said no, and it has.
Some of the things that we thought would never, ever work, the ministry minute came out of our book study, in the very beginning, I think, didn't it? And when somebody just sort of tossed out, wouldn't that be cool if we did that once a month? And I was like, oh my God, people would hate that.
Once a month.
People love it.
Not really.
People love hearing members of their community stand up and speak about how their community matters to them. It's a powerful witness. What are some other ones we thought would never work? We got some pushback from our vestry on the festive meal. Really? You want to spend money on that? And you're not even going to ask for money? That's a terrible use of our money. That's a terrible use of our money. But they came along, and I think are going to be. They upped our budget this year, so you know I think we're a little bit more willing to do that.
And part of what you have to be able to say, and you have to believe it yourself. Like I said, this is Winston Churchill with that cigar in his mouth. You got to say this is not just a trick to get people to give more. This is a ministry, and we believe in this, that this is important for people to grow in our church. Okay? So if people think this is just a gimmick, this is just you're going to feed me one night and then trick me into giving, $1 million the next day, they're not going to buy into it. That this is something that is a journey that we're all on together, and we believe in this stuff. We're not just making it up as we go along.
It's also why you can take this. You can't take it and just throw it on your church and have it work. This works for us, I mean, I'll tell you, the meditation booklets are hands down one of my favorite things, but we're not doing them again this year because we've already done them. So we're in the process right now of brainstorming, what could we do that would involve people in the same way, but would be different, that would, how can we put something on Facebook? How can we be multimedia, that kind of thing. We started brainstorming on that. And so changing it up and keeping an awareness of who's in your parish and where the need is a big part of keeping stewardship fresh and alive. But yeah, we used to have, our former chair used to say stewardship ain't for sissies. And she was right. I mean, it's when you invite people to discuss their lives and their money in an open and transparent way, it can be scary, but it can also be incredibly rewarding.
There's a little bit of Southern Illinois wisdom I got from a Baptist preacher one time. He said, when you throw a rock into a pack of dogs, the one that yells is the one that got hit. And you have to realize that when, some of this is involved a little bit of, not casting stone, that's a bad analogy. But some of this is peeling away some of these layers that people have built around their money and their time and their commitments. And it's painful, but when it's painful, don't think, oh, that was wrong, I shouldn't have done that. Part of the healing, part of the growing process is taking away some of that old stuff. And you do have to be sensitive.
Yeah, so there's,
But just don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. It's just like when she stands up on Sunday morning and says something that's difficult for people to hear. That doesn't mean God doesn't want us to hear it,
how much of your success do you attribute to things you did differently, and how much to how differences in how you communicated?
That's a great question.
I think that one thing that is true, not just in stewardship, but in life, is you can't say a thing too often in too many ways. You know, so one sermon one time a year is not going to do it, and that's part of what we've been trying to do, is communicate it more often and to be more transparent, as we've been talking about. Publish some of these numbers. Publish how your progress is going. Publish when your stewardship meetings are going to be. You know, if you want to come to the meeting, we're not doing anything behind closed doors. Come and hear it. Nobody comes. You know, nobody is eager. But when they hear, hey, this is a public thing. This is not just something that they went up to the mountain and came down with these stone tablets of a stewardship campaign. They're relieved, and they, you know. So I think that's part of it. But I think that changing it from this is what the church needs to stay open to we as people of God need to give back to our Maker. And communicating that as often as we can has been a vast improvement. Not only that, but the idea that giving should be costly. You know, if you're giving in a way that you don't even notice the money being gone, you're not giving enough. Okay? It should make a difference in how you live your life and what your budget looks like. There's this great line from King David in 2 Samuel where he goes and he wants to build an altar to God on this guy's land. And the guy says, oh, you know what, you're the king, I'll give you the land. And David says, no, I'm going to pay for it because I'm not going to give to God the thing that costs me nothing. It ought to cost you something to give to God. So, communication, what was the second thing I said? Communication as often as you can, and transparency. The idea that it's not about the church's need, it's about a person's need, and giving at a level that makes a difference in your life. We don't say 10%. 10% works for me. That's what the Episcopal Church teaches should be the baseline for stewardship. Not everybody's there. We've got other people who are past that, you know. Give it a level that makes a difference in your life is a good place for people to start.
I think a lot of where this started was with the book group, I mean, which sounds simple, but we started with a group of 10 people, which for our size is a good size. And so the people who, yeah, you're right, I did intend y'all to become the stewardship ministry here. I mean,
confession.
In Easter time. Well, I had an idea that y'all would be good, skilled at it. The people who began studying had, as it happened, I mean, it doesn't always happen this way, but a lot of them had conversion experiences just from studying this book together. And so when somebody's had a conversion experience, it's easier to talk to somebody else and say, this is what I experienced. So that began to have some ripple effects in the parish. The meditation booklets were an interesting exercise because we offered several writing workshops where we said, come in, we'll bring paper and a pen, and we're going to coach you through writing. Ask some key questions, you know, like what does it, kind of like the points to ponder. Write about a time when you've given something and it's meant something to you. Began to open up sort of the channel of asking some basic questions that are not, what does it feel like when you put $20 in the plate, but what's it like when your niece opens up your present on Christmas and her face lights up? What does that feel like to you as the giver? So that people began to ask in their own lives what the connection was. So we've had places like that where I think we've provided people with opportunities to have space to reflect on what it means to be a giver and how that affects their lives.
One of the things that was really helpful to me to hear when we went to this Episcopal Network for Stewardship Conference in Indianapolis, this guy said, you know, if you help move people into becoming generous people, a lot of the benefit that's going to come from that is not even going to come to your church because they're going to be generous, not only in your church, they're going to be generous to other charities, they're going to be generous to their family. And he said, you know, if you create generous people, that generosity is going to spill over into everything that they do. You know, it's not just I want to become a generous pledger at St. Peter's. I want to become a generous person. You know, I want to be the person that when I die, somebody could chisel generous guy on my tombstone and nobody would laugh if they knew me.